I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
The more you talk, the harder I want to hit you.
I'm happy because of being here today. Fuck you.
Come on, you want me to drive? No. You're supposed to be suicidal, remember? I'll
Anybody
drive.
a drive?
Let's get in the car.
Fucking shit. Fuck me in the fucking ass. Fuck you, you fucking stupid cunt.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And our movie review is going to be for the next three, beginning the next series, and in the review series we're doing, which was the spin-off series. Because, yeah, we finished 6 main Rocky films, but the Rocky series ain't over yet. Because we got these 3 movies to do now. This is going to be for none other than 2015's Creed, directed by Ryan Coogler, and was the first film in the next film in our spin-off film, not a main film, because the main series is over, the main story is over. Now, this was pretty much the passing the torch story, in a way. Pretty much passing the torch. So, what's the plot of Creed? So, Adonis Johnson is the somewhat-ish son of the famous boxing champion Apollo Creed, who had died in Rocky IV against Drago. Adonis wasn't born until after his father's death, though, and wants to follow his father's footsteps in boxing. So, he goes to find a mentor, and it turns out to be none other than the former heavyweight boxing champion, and, well, friend of Apollo Creed, and, well, former rival of Apollo Creed, but then turned ally until his death, the retired Rocky Balboa, who is still running that restaurant. It's still around. Rocky eventually, though, after some reluctance, agrees to mentor Adonis. With Rocky's help, they hope to get a title job to facing deadlier opponents than his father, but whether he's a true fighter remains to be seen. So, as for my reaction, y'all remember how, if you remember back when I started YouTube, and I did a Rocky and Creed ranking, and now I gave this movie a 10 out of 10 back when I started YouTube. Well, back then, I did used to really love this movie a lot, before my taste was starting to evolve in movies. Now, upon finally revisiting it for the review series, how is the movie now? Is it still good? Yeah, okay, sure. I'd say it's still good, but is it as great as I once remembered it being? Probably not. I hate to say that. I can see why some people don't like it. But I'd say it's still good. For me personally, I would say where it kind of falters a little bit is kind of the middle act. Now, but the film does have some good cinematography, some good performances, some good shots. There is some good acting, but I would not say it's Oscar-worthy acting. And I'll get to why later. So how was this film made? So, you all know Rocky Balboa was the end of the franchise, but MGM hired Ryan Coogler in 2013 to do a spin-off, separate from the main films. Coogler, Covington's original screenplay, was completed in April 2014. The involvement of Michael B. Jordan and Stallone was also confirmed. The remaining cast got hired by January 2015, and filming began lasting until that April. And filming locations were Liverpool, Philadelphia, and Gainesville, Georgia. Creed then also became the last in career Robert Chertoff, who was one of the main producers of the franchise and died 2 months after the end of filming. And this film was dedicated to him. Then after Creed was officially shot and advertised, Creed would have its premiere on November 19, 2015 at the Regency Village Theater in Los Angeles, and was released in the United States on November 25th, 2015 by Warner Bros. Pictures to coincide, ironically, with the 40th anniversary of the day of the opening scene of the first film. At the box office, it was a success. It made over $173 million worldwide. It got widespread acclaim from critics for Coogler's direction, the screenplay, acting performances. Among the awards, it got selected by National Board Review as one of the top 10 films of 2015. Stallone won the National Board Review Award for Best Actor, Supporting Actor, Critics' Choice Award for Best Supporting Actor, Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, and nominated for Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. And it was followed by Creed 2 and Creed 3, and it's the first one in the franchise to have been produced by Stallone. Alright, so here are the good qualities in the story of Creed. So, for the good stuff of Creed. Creed, yeah, it's a good movie, but it's not a Rocky. And Adonis isn't really just a street kid. Boxing isn't really his only option. There's no Adrian, there's no Paulie, there's no Eye the Tiger, but Rocky does take on the Mick role. There's glimpses of the old Rocky Balboa, his heart knowledge and his wisdom, but Creed is not something where you expect to see, expect to just see Rocky the whole film, because Rocky is is in the movie, but he's not really in a lot of the movie. This is a new vehicle. It's a story that does have some flaws, and it's understandable. I feel the film could have used a bit more heart, like maybe a bit of a training montage or inspirational quotes, or even a little bit of a visit to Paul's grave. But there's too much flash and excess, and there's times the story does kind of rehash a bit of Rocky 1, 2 into 1 in a little bit. That's some of people's criticisms with the film. And that's a movie that's been kind of done quite a few times compared to Creed. Its execution, presentation tries to elevate the story, but unlike some of the other Rocky films like, 1 and 2, Rocky 4, Rocky Balboa, and there's some of the drama just doesn't feel all that grand. Like the scene where Adonis gets in a fight in that club, it's not really unnatural. And the bit where Rocky gets cancered is kind of ham-fisted and just kind of unearned for the sake of trying to have emotional bits. Like, if you're trying to make it a little emotional bit for Rocky, you don't need to have him get cancer. If you want to have his subplot be emotional, here's what you could have did instead. You could have had, maybe Rocky... You remember that bit of the PTSD he suffered at the beginning of Rocky 5? You could have explored that more. You could have explored that with this subplot. Except this time have him get a bit of PTSD from Apollo Creed's death, because this series is kind of about Apollo Creed's son. So maybe have Rocky still get some of that PTSD from not calling off the fight in Rocky 4, Maybe go for some of that stuff. You didn't need to have him get cancer. Otherwise, it does hit some right notes, and the fight choreography was good as usual. The characters do kind of lack the quirky depth and pathos of the original characters that Stallone created with Michael B. Jordan. Now, Michael B. Jordan didn't really have much of a big career before this movie. He did have a Chronicle, which was actually good, but he did a few minor TV appearances. And then before this, he appeared in that awful 2015 Fantastic Four crap movie. Before doing this, and this was kind of the film that really kind of got him majorly launched in the spotlight. How he got the roles like, Sinners, Black Panther, all that stuff. Because of this movie. It's a thing, and they try to give Adonis Creed some backstory, but it's just story. Like, you don't really feel much of an emotional connection with this backstory like you did Rocky. Right here. Because a lot of it just kind of rehashes the first two movies. With the rest of the movie falls to, there's times you do like the guy, there's times he can be a bit of a prick. And the stuff with Rocky being the trainer, that actually was not a bad idea. Don't have him try to go back into the ring again, just have it be a pass the torch story. There, but the thing is, they try to market Rocky heavily, despite the fact he doesn't really appear in the movie much. How do we start off? So, We start off in 1998. During the gap between 4 and Balboa, Adonis Johnny Johnson, who was the son of the late Apollo Creed, who was, by this extramartial affair, is serving time in Los Angeles Youth Detention Center, where Creed's widow, Mary Ann, takes him in. And that's how it kind of starts off. And then we get to the real time of the year the movie takes place, 2015, where Adonis is in Tijuana. He's preparing for his fight in a amateur boxing bout hosted in a bar. He returns from his latest fight. He resigns from his job. And because he wants to pursue his dream of becoming a professional boxer, Adonis auditions at Los Angeles' Elite Boxing Academy, which is managed by his family friend, Tony Evers Jr., who is the son of Apollo's trainer. But he gets turned down. And it gets further emphasized when he's beaten in a sparring match by heavyweight champion number 2 pound for pound Danny the Stuntman Wheeler when he challenges the whole gym to prove himself. Betting his Ford Mustang that no one can get a clean head shot on him, of course. And to be fair, you can kind of see why Creed loses this bit. Because when Creed entered the boxing ring, he kind of acted all cocky, thought he was a little too much strong despite not having too much fighting experience. And thought he was like above the other opponents, and just kind of got easily taken down because he didn't have much training experience. Then Mary Ann, who found out he had quit his job, opposes his dreams of being a boxer because she remembers how Apollo was killed by Evan Drago, and even recounts all the time she's had to carry Apollo upstairs during the fights he did lose and got injured from. But Adonis doesn't listen to these warnings, and he goes to Philadelphia to get in touch with his father's old rival turned friend, Rocky Balboa. Because he actually later watches one of their fights on YouTube, and he mimics some of their fight moves, and he then travels to Philadelphia, and that's where our story really kicks off. It's a not bad following to the long-running Rocky series, where it does take parts of 1, 2, and 4, but it relies too heavily on uplifting ideas from earlier movies. Where this time around, Rocky is taking on the Mickey Rourke's trainer and mentor of the newcomer Creed. Rocky's taking a protege and training him in the style that made him a champ. There are some attractive and moving scenes about the training extreme endeavor, and Stallone and B. Jordan do have some not bad scenes together. They actually do have some good chemistry together. Like, at least they didn't make Adonis, during their scenes together, at least they don't make Adonis Creed some Helena, like they did with Helena and Indiana Jones and Indiana and the dumpster of Disney. The supporting cast is pretty good as well. Tessa Thompson as Creed's girlfriend is not bad. Graham McTavish, Felicia Rashad, among others. And get a bit of a brief appearance of Dolph Lundgren, who's going to later appear in Creed 2. And the story would have been a little more interesting and engaging if, maybe Adonis had been raised by Mary Ann and only learned who his real father was upon her deathbed. Or that does later happen, though, and, well, the deathbed bit did happen in Creed 3. So, what I would have liked better is, maybe if Adonis Creed was actually his son that was raised this whole time, and, maybe it would have had a bit more of a connection. Right there, and not just kind of starting off in juvie, and then getting adopted by Mary Ann. And, and later learning that, it would be a little more believable for Adonis to seek out his former rival, Rocky Balboa. To learn about his father, connect with him through Rocky, and try to become a champion like him. Like, the scene in the restaurants, and it's definitely not bad. The various gyms would be a little better, kind of, if Adonis was learning about his biological father for the first time in those moments, but just doesn't really happen that much. Now, Stallone does work as a miracle mentor, where he takes a character we all know and adds some more dimensions that he does age and kind of try to confront the end of his days, but now that part would not be bad, but the reason why I'm not really a fan of the fact that he gets cancer in the film is because it just feels added. it just feels lazy. It's like they just added it to get a cheap tiered reaction out of the audience, which you didn't need to do. There were plenty, like I've said, there were plenty of other things you could have did with this mentor role Rocky to get more emotion from the viewers. Like, you didn't need that. There, and like the character Adonis just didn't really feel as compelling as Rocky Balboa. I feel like the thing is, Adonis, I feel, could have used a bit more character writing and maybe a bit more likable scenes. Like Rocky had plenty of great writing. Rocky had plenty of perfect character development right there, and also just rely less on trying to be nostalgia throwbacks and not just trying to be Rocky 1 and 2. Like, when you watch the original Rocky, what jumps to you in the first half is that, not because Rocky's tough or a great boxer, is what really sticks with you when you watch the first Rocky. He's a nice guy in a tough neighborhood, takes abuse from everybody, his mob boss, the boss's driver, the lady who runs a pet shop, kids on the corner, the guy who runs a gym. Rocky has a place to roll. It's at the bottom of it. So, when Adonis gets to Philadelphia, he goes to Rocky's Italian restaurant Adrian's that surprisingly still lasted. It's thankfully not closed down. So at least Rocky still has his restaurant. And he meets Rocky after Adonis looks at the photo of him and Apollo fighting. And he asks Rocky to be his trainer, but Rocky doesn't want to return because he did have bad prior experiences as a trainer. Which, since I don't acknowledge Rocky 5 as canon, I just acknowledge that as a separate thing. Or, maybe he decided to be a trainer after Balboa. And bad experiences happen off screen. But he eventually agrees. Or heck, if you don't want to acknowledge Rocky 5 as canon, he could. Nah, never mind. Moving on. So eventually, you also remember that third fight that happened at the end of Rocky 3. Adonis asks him about that what happened between him and Apollo after Apollo helped Rocky regain the heavyweight title. And Rocky reveals in the third fight Apollo won. So Adonis then goes to the Front Street Gym. And several of Rocky's longtime friends as cornermen, which is kind of like, it's kind of like Mick's gym. So in a way, Mick's gym actually did kind of come back. It was like, because you remember Rocky Balboa, it was demolished. Well, it's kind of got a bit of a new name, but they kind of got reopened. So at least Mick's gym is back. He meets Tessa Thompson's character Bianca, and they fall in love. Bianca's this up-and-coming singer and songwriter who's in the stages of hearing loss. So Adonis fights by a mother's surname Johnson, and the fight named Hollywood that defeats Fire Leo the Lion Sporino, which upsets the opposing corner. And there's an opposing side that leaks the news that Adonis is Creed's illegitimate son. Then Rocky gets a call from a heavyweight champion, Pretty Petty Rick Conlon, who got forced into retirement because of prison, and he's going to make Adonis his final challenger and prove that he could fight using his father's surname Creed. Adonis is hesitant to use the name Creed first because he wants to kind of forego the legacy, but he agrees after Bianca convinces him to. Now, when it comes to Ryan Coogler and Eric Covington's screenplay, before I get to that, Ryan Coogler has always been a director I'm on. I mean, he's not too bad, but I wouldn't say a lot of his movies are 10 out of 10 masterpieces. The one movie I would say I loved, the one movie I would consider a masterpiece from him is probably Sinners. That's really it. Sinners, I will say, is probably the one movie of his I consider a masterpiece. But, I mean, Ryan Coogler does some great shots here, and then Eric Covington's screenplay does have a bit of the spirit of the Rocky series and gets for most of it, but it just gets predictable sometimes, and Coogler's direction can be excellent, yeah, like when Rocky visits Apollo and Adrian's graves, and he's kind of recounting what he's going through, and kind of the struggles with sleeping and stuff, like he's getting up in old age, or when Creed Adonis visits Adrian's restaurant and he meets Rocky there and he's looking at the photos of their fights. Those are some well shot moments. Irwin, even while in the hospital when Rocky is training Creed, or the last shot when him and Creed are walking up the stairs. Those are well shot moments. Coogler does those shots well. He does handle the narrative a bit well. The cinematography and editing are still perfect, and so the boxing scenes, yeah, they're okay. They're nicely choreographed, I guess, but they're just not the boxing scenes you see in the other films. And the performances, okay. Michael B. Jordan does give actually good performance as Adonis Creed. Tessa Thompson does give a decent performance as a love interest, despite the fact that the romance between her and Michael B. Jordan doesn't really feel much use to the film. It doesn't really go a lot, really, and I feel more should have been done with that. Stallone actually still does good as Rocky, but honestly, I kind of think his performances as a character in the first two films, Rocky 3, in the other Rocky films, some of them feel more Oscar worthy than here. Right there, and once again, there's only one reason he really got Oscar nominated for his role in Rocky. Now, it is a little formulaic, but being a little formulaic is not necessarily a bad thing with this movie. Like, the story of the film is, I guess, fine for a sports film story. Like, despite still taking elements from Rocky, the director, screenwriter, the actors, they do believe in the story and the franchise, and it does show in their work. Where Creed, I guess, does go through a bit of a growing process where dealing with the memory of his father, his relationship with Rocky, and having his confidence he had to land and be more pragmatic with it. And all that made part of his journey right here fine. And then he does wear his father's last name and gets closer to Rocky. And Rocky goes through a process of getting back into training, gets motivated again, and has to be open again to having a somewhat-ish son like Adonis. Though, that's one other thing. They mentioned Roberts, but Robert's not even in the movie. Which was another waste of potential, because, you could have actually had Robert play a role in the story. You didn't need to just mention him off screen for one scene and that's it. So you could have had him play a bit of a role in this movie with this next part I'm about to mention. And this is where the film falters a little bit. This is a problem I have with the film. So, at one point, while helping Adonis train, Rocky then eventually throws up, passes out, and Adonis takes him to the hospital. And after some tests, he's diagnosed with cancer. And I feel that was the one reason why Sly was nominated for this movie. It's because Rocky gets cancer, and that's it. Apparently, that's why. And, here's what I'll mention. There were plenty of other more Oscar-worthy moments when Stallone played Rocky that wasn't just getting cancer. Some people always say Rocky 3 is one of the more sillier ones. Really? Is it? How is Rocky 3 one of the more sillier ones? Fine, it's a little less dramatic than Rocky 1 and 2, but it still deals with, but that one, Mickey, his father figure trainer, actually dies in front of his face after Clubber Lang basically causes his death, after he lost that fight with Clubber Lang. And then Rocky then pretty much is just struggling to say words while crying over his dead father figure. That was an Oscar-worthy moment, I let Sly capture that moment perfectly well. And throughout all of Rocky 3, he's unable to keep up with his training because he's still traumatized from Mickey's death. And still blaming himself for it. And the reason he eventually snaps out of it is because Adrian gives him a pep talk. And then he finally snaps out of it by the middle act. There's even Rocky Balboa. His speech towards Robert. That was more Oscar-worthy than him getting cancer. And like I've literally said before, here's things you could have done with this. Either, if you want to have Rocky get cancer, then have Robert play a role in this story or or what does motivate, or actually be the one that motivates Rocky to train Adonis. You know, like have a scene where he calls Robert on the phone at one point, and then mentions I met Adonis and asked to train, but he refused. But then Robert's the one that motivates him to do that. And if he's going to get cancer, then have Robert then start playing a more physical role in the rest of the main story, actually helping Rocky train Adonis in a way, because. But you remember, but he doesn't pursue boxing. He helped Rocky train in Rocky Balboa. He helped with the train. He helped everybody train Rocky for the final fight in Rocky Balboa. So why couldn't he just play a role in the main story? Then maybe the getting cancer bit would have felt less half-assed. Because I do not buy that Robert would not try to come visit his father after hearing of that news. I do not buy that. At all. So there was wasted potential there, either, and if you didn't want to do either of those, then just have a bit more emotional bit where Rocky's still dealing with some PTSD of Apollo Creed's death. There. That's what I think. And of course, because his own best friend, brother-in-law Polly, had also died, along with the rest of his friends. They convinced him to try to accept his eventual death and refuse to go through therapy. But Adonis finds this out, tells him to seek treatment, and tells him he's not gonna do that fight if Rocky doesn't try to get treatment and get better. And Rocky refused that, and then he leaves in anger. And tells him he's told he never believed they were really a family, and then he lashes out, then gets in a fight within a tiny banker's concert after comparing him to his father, and gets arrested. But then after it gets out, Adonis is not going to train for his fight if Rocky doesn't get treatment, and then Rocky eventually agrees to get treatment. This is kind of the bit of the film I just don't like. The good parts of this film, though, that do show everyone young and old has to be responsible for themselves, fight the fights that kind of need to be fought, whether it's physical, mental, medical. Avoid the ones that you don't need to engage in. Adonis and Rocky have to come face to face with these issues. The fight scenes are still, I guess, good. They're not like the fight scenes in 4, or the fight scenes in 3, or the fight scenes in the first 2, or the fight scenes in Balboa, but they're still decently good. At least they're not over jumpy and all over the place. Anyway, and this is a spin-off series, but at least Ryan Coogler was at least trying to somewhat keep the Rocky legacy alive, and at least not trying to be all Star Wars, and how Star Wars did it with J.J. Abrams, where The Force Awakens was just the same whole shot-for-shot of New Hope, and except, well, reduced to characters like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker to losers, where Han Solo became a criminal again, got stabbed by his son, and chucked into a garbage can as his death. Or where Luke Skywalker is a grumpy old fuck, throws his father's fucking lightsaber like it's a stupid toy, it acts like an asshole half the film, drinks alien titty milk, or uses this trick and doesn't even actually leave the stupid island he's on, and then just dies like a fart in the wind. At least it's not those. At least Coogler did try to actually more respectfully keep the Rocky legacy alive. In this case, though, the fights look amazing on screen, but the film does lack the opportunity to kind of present a great villain that would take the legacy of baddies from every Rocky film. So now we get on with the finale of the movie. Hold on, guys. Don't want that coffee getting too cold. Where by this time, you do get a bit of a training montage. The montage you do get is where Rocky, even though while he's trying to recover from his cancer, is still training Adonis. Right there, like, even in the hospital, which was some well-shot moments, and Adonis Creed is at least helping him recover and stuff. And then eventually, he fights Conlon at Goodison Park in the hometown of Liverpool, and some other parallels emerge between the ensuing bout and Apollo and Rocky's first fight 40 years earlier. Like, that's the thing. Some of the final fight does take elements from the final fight of the first film. And before he goes to the ring, he gets a present from Mary Ann, which is the trunks that Apollo and later Rocky wore in their fights in the first two films and Rocky 3. And to the surprise of everyone, Adonis gives Conlon all he can handle, and then Conlon knocks Adonis down. But then Adonis does suffer a bit of an eye injury. But then Adonis recovers enough to knock Conlon down for the first time in his career. Adonis does go the distance, but Conlon does win. However, though, even though Adonis lost the fight, he does win the respect of Conlon and the crowd through his efforts. And pretty much where Max Kellerman does say, Ricky had won the fight, Adonis won the night. And then Adonis gets told by Conlon that he's going to be the future of the light heavyweight division. And then you get the last shot, which I did like how this was I did like this well-shot moment where Adonis and Rocky, who is now starting to recover from his cancer, climbs the steps outside the entrance that Rocky always once ran up, and Rocky does struggle a little bit, but eventually he does make it to the top, and Rocky and Adonis are acknowledging the view as they're looking over the Philadelphia landscape, and they're like, nice view, and I liked how this shot ends the movie. Yeah, I really liked how they did this. Where they're looking at the landscape, and if this was going to be the end of the movie, then this was a nice way to end the movie. Where they're looking at Philadelphia, and then they go back down the stairs. And pretty much, that's how Creed ends. Creed may have lost the fight, but he gets respect from his opponent and the crowd and won the night, and Rocky is starting to show signs of beating his cancer. And everyone before Creed 2 came out, everyone thought Rocky will probably be dead by Creed 2. Well, next movie, thankfully, in Creed 2, it shows that Rocky did actually recover and beat his cancer and got the treatment he needed after this movie. So, thankfully he didn't. So, thankfully, at least Rocky did not die. At least Rocky survived and made it to Creed 2 and actually got to have much better portrayal in that movie. Which I'm going to be a little more positive on Creed 2 than I kind of was here, revisiting this. Once again, opinions can always change, guys. Alright, so now I don't have any bad qualities with Creed. So, yeah, like I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, Rocky getting cancer either should have not happened, or if they wanted that to happen, then they should have actually had Robert start playing a more role in the story and not just be mentioned for one scene. You know? Maybe Milo probably wasn't available, but come on. I wish Robert did play a bit of a role. May not be a bit of a boxing trainer, but he still helped Rocky train for the fight in Rocky Balboa, so you could have had him play a bit of a role in this moment, where he also starts, where during the times when Rocky's physically unable to, he kind of briefly takes over for some of those bits with training Adonis, right there, and actually being the one that actually convinces Rocky to train Adonis. You know, those were missed potential moments. You could have did that. If you wanted to have Rocky get cancer, you could have did those. And then maybe it would be a little more, and then maybe that bit would be a little more believable. Right there, but at least, I'll give credit, at least they didn't kill Rocky off. At least they didn't kill Rocky off. There are times Adonis can be a bit unlikable, up till kind of until kind of near the middle act. I feel Adonis could have had some better character writing, but I feel he's much better written in Creed 2 and Creed 3. And his romance with Bianca should have been handled better, because it doesn't really play much of a role in the story. And there are times that the movie does take elements from the other Rocky movies and gets a bit too nostalgia baiting for fans. Other than those, is Creed a horrible movie? No. It's a decently fine way to start off the passing the torch story. Just view Creed as just more passing the torch and not necessarily Rocky sequels. They're kind of, because this series and the next two are really kind of their own thing. They're a passing the torch story. They're a spin-off story. Spin-offs aren't necessarily sequels. So in the end, I probably would stream Creed because while it's good, it can be a bit overhyped due to some problems. Anyways, that's it for my view of Creed. And we're hungry in Creed. Here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you're a fan of Rocky and interested to see who carries on his legacy, I would probably stream Creed for sure, no doubt. And if we're running hungry in Creed, I'm going to give Creed a 7 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. That wraps up Creed. So, alright, we'll put you back. Oops, okay, we'll put you there. Alright. Now we have what thankfully to me is a better movie. That's going to be Creed 2 is our next film in the Creed review series. Where thankfully the spin-off series gets better. So yeah. Now I want to know in the comments down below what you guys think about Creed. Whether you love this movie, still really love this movie, or whether you do hate this movie and think it shouldn't have been made. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.